Hello, and welcome once again to Family Historian. My name is Stephen Conte. Tonight we're going to explore the wonderful and very concise records of the Roman Catholic Church. And joining me on tonight's show, I am very honored to have as my guest a very bright young lady. Her name is Brianna LoSardo. Brianna is currently the archivist for the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey. And on tonight's show, Brianna is going to teach us how we can use these wonderful Catholic records in finding our Catholic roots. And now let's welcome archivist Brianna LoSardo. Brianna, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Stephen.
Brianna, I have been to your archive, but for the benefit of our viewers, tell us the physical location of the Archdiocese of Newark.
Okay, so our archives are housed in the Monsignor William Noe Field Archives and Special Collections Center at Seton Hall University. So we're on the ground floor of the Walsh Library on the Seton Hall campus.
Right, and I've been there. It's a wonderful library, very accommodating to the researcher. And of course, the campus is quite lovely as well. Now, Brianna, I guess the first place to start when you're looking for your Catholic roots is going to the individual church itself, if it still exists. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can try to determine what parish your ancestors went to using things like census data. So if you can find their address on the census and then see what parishes were close to there, that's a good place to sort of start thinking about where to find your Catholic records.
Right. Now, if that church has closed or it has merged, this is where you have to go to the diocese or archdiocese. Is that correct?
Yes, so different dioceses have different policies for what happens when a church closes, where the records go. Some dioceses will send them to a receiving parish, so they might have gone to another parish in the area.
I see.
Some will centralize them in the Archdiocesan Archives, which is what we do in Newark.
Okay.
And some dioceses actually have all of the older records of all their parishes sent to a central archive. So it just sort of depends on what diocese you're in. So it's good to, if you want to look up on the diocesan website, if they have a page about archives or a page about sacramental records, that's a good place to look.
So it varies from each diocese.
Yeah,
okay.
It varies diocese to diocese.
Now, tonight we are using the Newark Archdiocese at Seton Hall as an example. So don't fret if you don't have ancestors in that geographic area. Now, what geographic area does your archive cover? What counties does it cover?
Yes, so we cover the New Jersey counties of Bergen, Essex, Hudson, and Union.
I say four. So
Four
if you have
counties, yeah.
ancestors within those counties, you're in luck. Okay. Now, how many dioceses are there in New Jersey for the Catholic Church?
So there are 5 in total. There's the Archdiocese of Newark, and then there's the Diocese of Paterson, the Diocese of Metuchen, the Diocese of Trenton, and the Diocese of Camden.
Right. So if your ancestor belonged to a church in one of those geographic areas, you would go to that diocese.
Yes.
I see. And how far back do your records go in your particular diocese?
So our records, the diocese was established in 1853. The earliest one of our parishes, I think, was established in the 1820s. So for parish records, we go back a little bit farther than the actual establishment of the diocese.
Right.
So generally from about the 1820s to today.
Very good, very good. Now also many of your records, I believe in the 1980s, were microfilmed by the LDS Church. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So we do have microfilm records for a lot of our parishes, and you can search those on familysearch.org.
Very good, okay. But you can still come to your archive and do the research in person.
Yes.
As I did. And there was a wonderful man who was there many years ago, Monsignor William Noe Field, who sat in the very chair where you are right now, and he taught me a lot about doing this kind of research. You know, Brianna, this is the 5th show this year that I have done on church records. And I must say that the Roman Catholic Church is in the close number 1 in keeping the best records. Very concise, very detailed. And that's a genealogist speaking. Okay. And I know that you are a sometimes genealogist without even knowing it. But you do have someone on your staff who does help the researcher.
Yes, so I help the researchers, or we have another person as well that performs genealogy searches.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if your Catholic ancestor came from another state it would be the same thing. They would have dioceses in those states.
Yeah, so there's dioceses all across the country. Again, it varies diocese to diocese, the structure that they have for their archives and whether they centralize the records in the archives or have the records all distributed out in the parishes.
Right, right.
So it's a good starting point, but you may have to go other places as well.
Right. Now, your counterparts in New Jersey, like Metuchen, Patterson, you mentioned, will they have a physical archive as well, a library as well, where the researcher can go?
They all do have archives. I can't speak exactly to what their policies are for researchers coming in. You would have to contact that diocese.
I see,
Yeah.
okay. But you have met your counterparts, the other archivists for those dioceses?
For the most part. We have a New Jersey Catholic Historical Commission, so that's when we kind of all meet up and talk to each other.
And compare notes. Okay. Now let's get to the records, okay? Because I'm going to show you some personal records of mine. My late father was a Roman Catholic. I am not. I was raised in my mother's religion. But I was able to find his birth record. Now we're going to use the word record because there is a difference between record and certificate. And that's what Monsignor Field taught me, and you know this as well. This is from a church in Newark, New Jersey, and it's the entry of my father's birth in the year 1913.
I'm sorry, Stephen. It's baptism, just
Baptism.
to be clear. Yes.
What did
yeah.
I say?
You said birth.
Birth,
so,
okay,
yeah.
baptism. That's the first. We have sacraments in the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Can you name the four that we'll be discussing this evening?
Yeah, so the ones that are most useful for genealogists are baptism, communion, confirmation, and marriage. Those are the ones that you'll generally find records of that are accessible to genealogists.
For the researcher,
Yeah.
okay. When I meant to say birth, I meant that his birth date is on here. This is his baptism record.
Yes.
And it will give both the birth date and the baptism, which was maybe a month later or a few days later. It depends.
Yes, it varies, but generally it's fairly close after the birth.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is from 1913. My father was born on September the 2nd in 1913, and he was baptized in October of 1913. And this record will reveal the parentage, of course, and the all-important godparents. Those are always listed here. So it's a very concise record. Now, this is what we call a baptism record. But I was showing Brianna this next document that I have here. This is the certificate of baptism for my father. And all of the information, or most of the information from the record, will be on the certificate of baptism, especially in ethnic churches. Can you explain ethnic Catholic churches in
Yes.
New Jersey?
Sure. So there's two types of parishes. There's a territorial parish, which just sort of brings in, people from the area that it's in. And then there are ethnic parishes or national parishes that sort of draw from a wider radius, and they generally are for people of different ethnic groups that might want to hear the Mass in another language or have a priest speak to them in another language.
Right.
So Italian, Polish, German. There are many parishes in the Archdiocese of Newark that were ethnic parishes when they were established.
And my father, who was of Italian descent, he was a first-generation Italian-American, was baptized in this Italian-American church in Newark, New Jersey in 1913. So even their certificate, it says in Stati Uniti d'America on here, so they would accommodate the ethnic Catholic, you see, in this case, the Italian Catholic. But I've seen Polish Catholic church records, German, Lithuanian, okay, Irish Catholic churches, and I believe in Patterson, many years ago, there was a French Catholic church, Our Lady of Victories, where many of the Belgian French who worked in the Patterson silk mills went. Those ethnic churches have kind of disappeared now over the years. I think they've been replaced by Filipino Catholic churches. I've seen that nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, there are still, occasionally a national parish will still be established, but it sort of has to do with some of the demographics in the area. So, back in the 1800s when many of these ethnic parishes were established, there were not as many parishes overall. So now
Right.
there's sort of more parishes than are needed to serve the Catholic population. So instead of establishing new national parishes, they often will sort of reassign an existing parish and, give them priests that speak in the language of their community.
Right.
So it's sort of more embedded in the communities instead
Right.
of having like one national parish.
But
Yeah.
these records are from those early Ellis Island immigration years,
Yeah.
when the Italians came over and the Poles and the Germans and the Lithuanians. Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to get this in a split screen to show you the difference between a record and a certificate. So this would be the certificate of the baptism record. That's the difference. Did I make that clear? Is that
Yes,
the best
yeah.
definition?
Yeah.
Okay. I remember years ago when I went for my driver's license, we had to present a birth certificate. And I brought the one that was given to me from the hospital. That was a certificate, but it wasn't a government issued. In that case, it was a government thing. But I think the record will hold up more in court. Would you say so than the certificate?
I don't know about in court, but yeah, generally, so a certificate can be issued at any time from the record. So
Right.
the record is really the master sort of
That's
copy.
that's
Yeah.
it. That's a very good thing. Now, we did the sacrament of baptism. In the Catholic Church, what is the next sacrament? A person, at what age do they?
So generally, it's First Holy Communion or Eucharist, usually around the age of 7, and that the records for that. I don't know if you want me to talk about this.
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
we'll show it while you speak on that. And by the way, all of these early records are in Latin, which is the language of the Church, and you can usually figure it out. But Brianna, in today's Catholic Church, do they still keep records in Latin?
Not generally. Most of the records are kept in English now.
I see. Okay. And I think the Mass is still in, they don't do the Mass in Latin anymore.
No, not since the 60s.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so this would be communion.
Yes. So on the communion record, you'll have generally less information than was in the baptismal record.
Right.
So, for instance, in this communion record, you just have a record number, which is just something that the parish was using to keep track of these records. And then you have, the list of names of people who received communion on that date. And then it says, the heading says day, month, and year of birth, but it's actually just giving the age in this record. So they didn't actually put in the day, month, and year of birth. They just put in what age they were.
Right.
And then the date that they received the Eucharist or Holy Communion is on the far right, and that's going to be the same date for everyone because they all received on the same day. So this is generally something that's done in a group, and baptisms are generally done sort of individually. Each family brings in their child for baptism.
Right. So these children would be around the 7-year age.
Yeah, so I mean, it's strange because in earlier records it was actually flipped. So today we receive communion generally before confirmation, but I believe in earlier times it was actually reversed. So you would receive confirmation before communion. So these children look like they're mostly receiving, the earliest age I see on here is 7, the latest age I see is 15 on this one. So it can be a fairly wide range of ages. If you're looking for a communion record, you might want to just sort of cast a broad net just to make
Right.
sure. Yeah.
And when is a communion a seasonal? Is it usually in the spring when they have communion, or is it could be any time of year?
I believe it could be any time.
Any time. It depends on the parish.
Yeah, it depends on the parish.
All right. And now, after communion, what is the next sacrament a Catholic person would experience?
So generally confirmation, and that's another one that's sort of done in a group. So you'll see on this record that we have, we have a record number again, and then we have the names. Nomen impositum, I think that's for, and confirmation, you generally take an additional middle name, a confirmation name they call it, so that's what this column is for.
So you're given, it's not a middle name, it's your
Yeah.
confirmation name.
Yeah.
And who, the priest gives you that name, or the family, or?
I believe you choose it generally. So that, and that's not always included in the record. That's just sort of something, it might be included, it might not. So I believe that here it is. And then we have, again, the age, and then the name of the sponsor. So for confirmation, you need to have a sponsor, generally just one sponsor. So you would choose someone in your family or, that you would like to to be your sponsor.
That's not the same as a godparent.
No.
A godparent is at the baptism.
Godparent,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
they are referred to as sponsors also, so you might see them referred to as sponsors in the record at
Mm-hmm.
baptism. And generally there will be two for baptism, two baptismal sponsors, and then you have one confirmation sponsor generally.
So this will even name the sponsor.
Yeah, so
So-
this record is naming the sponsor. Again, it varies a little bit. They don't all, but most of them, I believe, do name the sponsor.
So your records,
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned in my intro, are very concise and very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say so?
It varies a bit by parish, but yes, in general.
In general,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Because the late and great Monsignor Field told me that the bishop would
Mm-hmm.
usually make the rounds to see if records were being kept correctly by the parish priest.
Yes, yeah.
Have you heard that as well?
Yes, definitely. They would, and I believe they still do to some extent.
They want to
Yeah.
make sure that these records are kept
Mm-hmm.
in order. Also, is the priest himself usually the record keeper?
So generally, the priest will sign off on things, but a lot of times it's kept by the parish secretaries. You know, the clerical staff that work in the office of the parish will be the ones writing things into the book.
Right.
And then the priest will review them or sign off on them.
But in the olden days, do
Mm-hmm.
you believe the priest was the one who would be responsible for the record keeping?
Yeah, I think it depends on the parish again, but in some cases, yes. In some cases, they would have had someone helping them with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And at what age would a person be confirmed in the Catholic Church?
So generally around 12 to 15, I
Be-
think. Yeah,
and-
so, and again, on this record, it seems like it was a bit earlier, so we have some ages ranging from about 9 to 11 in this record.
Right, right.
And again, like I said, it was done at a little bit of an earlier age in earlier time periods.
And this is the record that confirms you as a Roman Catholic, is that correct?
Yes.
I see, okay. Now, the next one we have in our lives is the marriage record, which is a sacrament, the sacrament of marriage. And this is about me tonight. I apologize for that. But I do have the marriage record of my grandparents from a church in Newark, New Jersey. They were the immigrants, and they married in December of 1907. And again, it lists the parentage of my grandparents and their witnesses. And so I get the names of my great-grandparents who never came to America. So this is a very fine record for the researcher. And again, it's from the year 1907 in a church I don't believe exists anymore. I think there was a church before the old Mount Carmel Church. But you said Mount Carmel Church is still in existence
Yes.
in Newark. Okay, because they called it Monte Carmelo. Okay, very good. Now, there's something that happens to all of us. It's not a sacrament, but it's the last record that we experience in our lives, and that would be the
Death records or interment records.
burial record. And I think
Yeah.
you might have a copy here.
Yes, so I have the interment record here.
Okay, interment, which is burial. Okay.
Yeah, so this is just a fairly basic record. It's giving the date and place of burial, the name of the person interred, and it gives their place of birth and their age. So that's all good information. You won't always have these depending on, so this is probably a record of interment from a parish that had a cemetery attached to it. Parishes also keep death records, so there might be a record sort of similar to this that doesn't include sort of the interment information.
Right.
That's just sort of relating to death. And then there are also, another thing that we have on microfilm is records from Catholic cemeteries. So, for instance, Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in East Orange is, a big one that a lot of people from Newark were buried in.
Right.
So we have burial records for there as well.
Now,
So-
these cemeteries, maybe back in the olden days, were attached to the church on the same property.
Yeah.
Are there some of those still in existence, where the church is there and then in the backyard is the graveyard?
Yeah. There are some still in existence, yeah. And this is generally what these kinds of records of interment would be referring to.
I see. But what about Catholic-owned cemeteries? If a person was buried from a certain church,
Yeah.
does the church own a cemetery?
So the diocese owns several cemeteries,
right.
in the Archdiocese of Newark at least. So those cemeteries, we have an office of Catholic cemeteries that sort of handles all of that sort of centrally. And then, like I said, we have some records on microfilm from those as well. And those will be like burial cards and day books, which are basically registered
From
as
the
a burial.
church, from the church.
From the cemetery.
Right from
Yeah.
the cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay. And will the cemetery have copies of those?
Yes.
They will.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine, fine. Now, there's something very unique, and here we go about the detailed ability of the Roman Catholic Church records. It's very unique to Catholicism. It's called marginalia. Very pretty word, marginalia. And I'm going to have our fine guest, Brianna LoSardo, explain what marginalia is.
Yeah, so this generally appears in the baptismal record. They're also called notations. So the baptismal record is considered sort of your master record throughout your life.
Right.
So when you make other sacraments, the parish where you made a later sacrament like marriage will send a letter to the parish where you were baptized saying so-and-so was married in our parish on this date and they were baptized in your parish on this date. Please enter it in your register. So then they would update the baptismal record with information about your marriage. So you can sometimes find things in the baptismal record that occurred much later than the actual baptism because they're being updated throughout your life. When
In
you
the
make
margin. In
yeah,
the margin.
it'll generally be, so like in the record that you have of the baptism, it would be on the right-hand side. There's a space in the margin for things to be written. It would generally be there, or in some baptismal records are set up with columns, so there'll be a column for notations or remarks.
It's like a crossed kind of index, isn't
Yeah.
it? Would you call it that? I've never seen that before in any other denomination.
Yeah.
So, but if the person was baptized in that parish and married in that parish and died in that parish, it would be right there.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if they went to another parish, that they would correspond.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see. The parish would correspond with the other parish
Yeah.
to update the marginalia. Okay.
Now, I will say that, this is what's supposed to happen, but in the real world, like sometimes letters go astray or,
Right.
things are not as organized. So
Right.
if you find a baptismal record and it doesn't have a reference to their marriage, that doesn't necessarily mean that they never married. There might have been an issue, getting the notation from one parish to the other.
Right,
Or they
right.
might have been married civilly and it was never, because it wouldn't be noted if they were married, in a civil ceremony. It would
Yes.
only be for Catholic church marriages.
Right, right.
That it would be updated, so.
And I have a record here. Now, this is not the original record. The original record is in the Liber, I guess they call it the Liber Renatorum, the Book of Baptisms, the Latin term. It's in Italy, but they sent me something on their own stationery. This is from a church in Minturno, Italy, where my family came from, the Conte family. It's the actual baptism record of my great-great-grandfather who was baptized in 1822. And as Brianna was telling us, in the margin, you have information. This priest was on the ball, okay? Because it lists his parents, my third great-grandparents, and their parents. Now I have the names of my fourth great-grandparents. And in the margin, it lists his marriage and the year of his marriage, and it lists his date of death. He died in 1883, born in 1822, and died in 1883. It's right here in the margin. So this is the beauty of doing Roman Catholic research, because you might be doing one record and then all the other information is in the margin. Or I know Monsignor Field called it the life record. This is what he called it.
Yeah.
So this is a great example of marginalia. Okay. Let's get back to the William Noe Field Archive in the Walsh Library on the campus of Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey. And that's a mouthful. Okay. What are your hours of operation? Or do you have to make an appointment? What information should the researcher come with to make it easy, to make your life easier and the life of your staff?
Yeah, so we're open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We're by appointment only, so definitely, make an appointment if you want to come in to do genealogy research. You can contact us. You can email archives@shu for Seton Hall University .edu, or you can call. Our phone number's on our website. And yeah, we allow genealogy researchers to come in and use our sacramental records that we have on microfilm. We generally go up to about the 1930s in terms of our microfilm sacramental records, and it varies a bit by parish, so you definitely want to check with us before you make an appointment to come in.
Right, right. But in your case, it's just for the counties of Bergen, Essex, Hudson, and Union,
Yes.
all right? But as Brianna said, you have to go to these other archives for other geographic locations, okay? And what information should the researcher come with? I mean, I don't want them just to show up with a name and a year. What should they come up with?
So because the records are all kept sort of at the parish level, there's no way to search, there's no central index that we can search and find out what parish they were in.
Right.
So you need to have some idea of what parishes you want to look at if you're going to come in to do research. So things like if you could find an address from like the census, then we can help you find parishes that were close to there.
Right.
If you have other documents, like you have some marriage documents and baptism documents, often families would all be baptized in the same parish, or, if that's where they lived, they would all go to the same parish. So, where were your other family members
Right.
at the time? That can help you sort of narrow down an
Narrow
area
it
to
down.
search.
You just can't come in and say, well, I had an ancestor
Yeah.
who lived in Jersey City, which
Yeah.
is Hudson County.
We get a lot of like, oh, they were somewhere in northern New Jersey, and it's like, you can't really, I need something
Right.
to narrow it down a little bit.
Don't waste
Yeah.
your time and don't waste my time. Okay,
Yeah.
very good. This has been a wonderful interview with Brianna LoSardo, who was the archivist for the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey, at the William Noe Field Archive in the Walsh Library on the campus of Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey. Thank you so much.
Thank
You
you.
are a very bright young lady, and we appreciate having you. As a genealogist, you're our right arm. Okay? Thank you so much, Brianna.
Thank you, I
And as
appreciate-
I've been saying for many years, we are all descendants of ancient civilizations. Genealogy is your key to the history of your family. And so until next time, this is Stephen Conte wishing you the very best of luck in your research, and above all, happy ancestor hunting. Good night.